Alrighty, boogie woogie oogie, my dudes. I've already recorded this once, but the pacing was terrible, and I wasn't really used to doing this kind of thing. I've decided to go right out the gate with a 30-minute video before recording a bunch of smaller, shorter videos to kind of get myself at a better pacing. Ultimately, I am here to talk about Quadeca and whether or not I think Quadeca is a mainstream capable artist. I haven't really been super aware of Quadeca for a really long time. I wasn't aware of him in the work in progress era. I wasn't aware of him in the out of order era. I basically found him around the same time that I feel like most people found him, was during the KSI Beef. Consequently, I gave voice memos a shot and was surprised at the level that he elevated himself to at that time from where I kind of found him, again being like this, in a way it's a gimmick to be beefing with a YouTuber, but someone like KSI who does music beefing with a capable rapper, obviously we'll talk about that later. Yeah, so I was never positive if Quadeca could be a mainstream artist just off of what I've already heard. I've heard some mainstream sounding singles from him, and all of his recent singles have been good. Ultimately, I decided to go through his back discography and kind of give it all a shot, having not given it a shot before. Subjectively look at it from what age he was when he was releasing that music to what was I expecting. I'm gonna grade the albums on a scale of 10, basically, just like everybody else who reviews music, except for me, my scale kind of tips this way. 5 means it met expectation. Anything below a 5 means it did not meet expectations, and anything above a 5 means it exceeded expectations. With all that in mind, let's find out if, subjectively speaking, I think Quadeca could be a mainstream artist. In order to find out the answer to that overarching question, you kind of have to answer 3 questions as an artist that the general public ultimately will need answered in order to take you seriously. It is, who are you? Why are you, and why now? So to deep dive into all 3 of those, let's start with the who are you. Quadeca, birth name Ben Lasky, is a California rapper born October 2nd in the year 2000, which is still nuts to me. I'm not used to seeing people born in the internet era yet. I'm born in 1998. I'm not obviously too much older than Quadeca. He's someone who's grown up with the internet at a certain capability that it wasn't at when I was introduced to it, you know? Granted, we've probably grown up in relatively similar paths. So Quadeca is a young kid, sort of starts to go on this path of being just a YouTuber. He starts doing content similar to that of a KSI. KSI started and grew his fan base making FIFA videos. Quadeca made FIFA videos and soccer-based videos for a majority of his YouTube career, I guess you could say. And consequently, after KSI kind of took the career trajectory of rapper, it kind of proved in a way that it's a possible, not just income source for a human being that wants to be a YouTuber, to just make music, but perhaps make stuff happen. Now, there's people who've made smaller waves in the YouTube rap community that haven't broken through into a mainstream, but I would say KSI, especially as of late, and when him and Quadeca kind of went out ahead, KSI was making mainstream sounding music and mainstream budgeted music. And the budget is the biggest part, because someone like KSI is throwing a ton of money into it because he has a ton of money to throw into a rap career. And if someone like Quadeca is contesting with him, puts him in the position to be working with the people that he made voice memos with. And consequently, Ben Lasky decided to start his independent rap career. All that starts under the debut mixtape of the rapper Work in Progress. Now, Work in Progress is poorly mixed, and it's clearly a 15-year-old rapper, 15-year-old Quadeca nonetheless, but it's interesting to see the thought process of an early on Quadeca. He almost is making music akin to like Logic mixtape era. Aside from having the stage presence of someone like Logic, it's clear the influences on Quadeca early on. It is quite literally as self-advertised. It is a work in progress. I would say the standout tracks for me were like We Music Fire, which can't believe I'm saying that, Daydreams, which I think he brought back in the following project that I'm about to talk about, and Clouds. Those 3 were the ones that I saw the most potential in. Ultimately though, I'd give Work in Progress a 5 out of 10. That's not to shit on him to give it a 5 out of 10. That's just to say that it met expectation. You know what I mean? If this is a 15-year-old rapper, what am I expecting to hear from a 15-year-old rapper? Probably this. Following Work in Progress, Quadeca, I feel like, kind of got to hone in on some of his skills and did a level up that I wasn't necessarily expecting. While it wasn't my favorite project, you could see that he put his nose to the grindstone and actually started working on music. You could see that happening, because sometimes in order to do that, you have to take a regressional step with what you put out. He put in 2 years worth of work, and again, this is coming from someone who's been rapping since 2017. He put in 2 years worth of work in 1 year's time, and from an artist's perspective, that's incredible to see, because it shows that he's actually taking it seriously and views it as an option for him. Standout tracks for me on Nostalgia for the Now were I've Been Feeling Like, Game Time, Sure, Share, Sure, I don't know. You Can't Rap, the least listened to song on the album with 2 E's. For me, I've Been Feeling Like, the song off of Nostalgia for the Now, is a clear level up, and it shows his awareness of now melody sounding a little bit more like a song, not just like I'm a rap because I'm the best writer on the planet, you know? And I was there too, you know? But it shows that he kind of broke out of that thought process and early on in his life. It's better mixed music. I don't know if he got better at mixing, if he was giving it to somebody, maybe. I would love to think 16-year-old Quadeca is just handing music to a mix engineer who's like in his 40s, like, can you actually turn up the right side ad-libs a little bit? Like, that'd be hilarious. I don't think it's like that. I think he just probably knows what to listen for a little bit more. He's been doing it a little bit more. But again, I feel like he put in 2 years worth of progression in roughly 1 year's time, with straight improvements in each category that I'll break down later. As a whole, I would say the project is a little one-tonal, and it doesn't quite have the energy for what a young Quadeca was looking for. Ultimately, it's a 16-year-old rapper. He has a large awareness of the game and what he's trying to do and what it takes to be a rapper now, and I think that's thanks to the internet age and being able to invest in rap culture, even if you're not even from where rap culture originated from or part of rap culture at all. You could still be fairly educated in rap. Ultimately, I would still give Nostalgia for the Now a 5 out of 10. I was really close to giving it a 6, but ultimately I just didn't feel like it hit any marks that I wasn't expecting it to hit. I'm glad that he took all that progression, but you don't hear it until the next project, in my opinion. Out of Order for me is I think it's my favorite Quadeca project that isn't voice memos. Tracks like Wonderful, Blocked, Freestyle on a Thursday Afternoon, Formula, and IDGAF for I don't give a fuck. I don't know how he says it, but a 17-year-old Quadeca is the best mixed and most confident sounding Quadeca I've heard, like at least to this point. However, I would say in this project, there's more misses than typical. He doesn't quite hit the mark on some songs, which is why I'm still gonna give it a relatively even score out of 5 out of 10, saying that it met expectations. But the songs that exceeded expectations, I was actually shocked at the progression that it took. He consistently made some of the best songs he's ever made, but he put them out with some of the worst songs he's ever made. But he's starting to understand a runtime for a project. He's starting to understand flow. He is making a lot of progression into how his music is going to be consumed, which is going to do him a lot of favors later on in his career. But again, I would still give Out of Order a 5 out of 10. And in the same year, I believe he released an EP called Bad Internet Rapper. I want to say it's the same year, don't quote me. Standout tracks to me on that were 2016 was a bad year and Ben's. It sucks that 2016 was a bad year for him. Maybe it was a bad year because he was focusing so much on music, because he really, like I said, I feel like that was where he made some of the most progression in his art. For me, it's just kind of like a more of the same EP. I'm not upset that it's here, but it doesn't feel like an upgrade from the stuff that I've seen in Out of Order to this point. And it just feels like, I don't know. Like I'm not gonna go listen to these songs over any of the other ones. So I'm gonna give the project a 4 out of 10. It was just under expectation. I was hoping for a little bit more to have released in 1 year to see even further progression, but it just felt like more of the same. I don't know the story behind why any of these were released or if the dates are important, so if that's why, I understand, but ultimately I think it is about the art as well. In 2018, Quadeca kind of took a different approach to the content that he was making on YouTube. He made it about rap. So instead of making soccer content and making music, he made music-based content and made music. That makes a ton of sense from a marketing standpoint, and I think he started to see a lot of growth from it. I think he ultimately saw a lot of growth from his different styles of rap. I think he saw a lot of growth from the microphone videos that he did in a similar way that someone like Token has seen a lot of growth. Token is a YouTube rapper who I feel like has gotten the furthest in the game thus far as his origin, the type of music that he makes, I feel like is most representative of the microphone video culture. I would say that someone like Quadeca is a little bit more focused on the fact that he is a rapper making content on YouTube, not a YouTuber making music. And I think this would eventually lead to his fan base to grow by the thousands. Just as a side note, 2018, Quadeca and St. G released an EP. I didn't listen to it. I think they made it in a day. Cool, but I did not listen to it. But all of those YouTube style videos that he did would ultimately garner him passive views more so than his FIFA content. It would get him more of an audience that he would intend to make music for. And ultimately all of this growth would crescendo amidst something that he didn't even bring upon himself, which is the KSI beef. So after shitting on Quadeca, among other YouTube rappers in KSI fashion, classic KSI, Quadeca kind of found himself in a position to kind of prove his legitimacy as an artist and stand his ground. And all this would kind of help him decide how long his sticking power is on that platform. We saw people like Dax kind of struggle against KSI because KSI was able to laugh him out of the booth a little bit more. Dax doesn't know too much about KSI, except Quadeca, someone who's been on YouTube and clearly aware of KSI. I don't think you make FIFA and rapping videos and you're not aware of KSI. Because of how aware Quadeca was of KSI, he was able to honestly stomp on him in a way that only a fan could. So a creator's ability to punch upwards in the community is how you grow. You need to talk about people bigger than you in order to see growth because they have larger fan bases. Without the ability to work with, or in some cases attack, people who are larger than you in size, the creator has a harder time seeing substantial and consistent growth. Quadeca has effectively here leveraged this opportunity, which he didn't initially portray himself as the bad guy because KSI kind of just was like, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you to like a bunch of people in the scene, just because I think he was trying to be like, yo, someone test me right now. And ultimately Quadeca tested him, and in the best case scenario where he wasn't even brought upon as the bad guy, he kind of exposed KSI in a way that nobody else has on the platform. KSI was kind of on this god complex power rage and decided to fire shots at basically any rapper on the platform, and all in one conversation. And in doing so, KSI brought a bunch of attention to the What's Good podcast, but Quadeca was also able to spin the narrative that JJ has been kind of spinning on the internet and doing for a minute now, and he kind of forced him to swallow a pill that he wasn't actually untouchable, which KSI absolutely thought he was untouchable up until that point. And up until that moment, due to how selective JJ was with who he attacked, KSI hadn't really poked anybody who was above his skill set. Now, I'm not saying he hasn't poked somebody who's above his audience base or above his relevancy. I would say for the most part, people that he attacked were of equal relevancy, maybe a little bit less relevant. But this is the first time he poked people like small, like people who most people hadn't heard of, I would say, that was in his audience. He was just bringing attention to these people that nobody knew for the most part, or maybe a few people knew. However, when you're KSI, you're not just rapping every day. Someone like Dax, someone like Crypt, someone like Quadeca is rapping every day. And I think Quadeca is the person who kind of used that energy and his ability and was the only one who really showed up to the occasion best as he could have, at least. And all this kind of garnered him some mainstream attention thanks to the massive subscriber chunk that is the Sidemen, and everybody having to react to it, and the content loop that is the Sidemen, because again, you get on all 7 of their fan bases, all of them are going to know who you are, and they got like 10 million subs, if not more now, just as a unit. To be beefing with KSI, the biggest member, like, you were going to get a lot of fans, especially from the UK. Insecure ended up landing Quadeca in a position where he had mainstream eyes and attention, and what you need to do with that sort of growth is cradle it and consistently increase it in size by maintaining attention and using that energy to excite a fan base and to give you even more eyes than you already have. Genius reaches out for him to do a verified on Insecure, and someone like Quadeca with the business mindset that he has is like, no, let's do it for awesome. I didn't think Quadeca would do something like that, but the fact that he's making business moves for the betterment of his music makes me feel like that work in progress and out of order and nostalgia for the now, all the stuff that was putting the nose to the grindstone, was not for naught, because he understands the value of his music. What that did do for him is also get him on the opportunity to be like in the new fast rapper group. I would argue that he's just like a fast rapper that has come from YouTube in the same way that Token is a fast rapper that has come from YouTube. Like getting on Twista's radar for Genius. Genius really did respect Quadeca with how they utilized him, and he was able to use all that for that upcoming release of his, which was Voice Memos, which had standout tracks to me like Red Dot, Eco Death, A Dream I Can't Remember, Man on My Left Shoulder, and Real Thing. So a 19-year-old Quadeca as opposed to maybe a 16 and a 17-year-old Quadeca. This is probably the longest time that we've had from a release Quadeca as far as him being silent. That kind of Quadeca ultimately has a clear understanding of melody, flow, and lyricism. He's a little simple and basic when it comes to punchlines still, and he doesn't quite find himself akin to mainstream artists, but it's a clear jump in just mix and production and performance. And also he has a clear understanding of what music is currently popular, and he's clearly relying less on YouTube type beats for content, which you could tell he was using YouTube type beats for a lot of old stuff, and he might still be. It's clearly a step up as far as creating your own sound and creating your own music. And while he overused the beat switch, I guess, gimmick in this, and some YouTube references in there are just low-key and work, or just like don't work at all. Like he had 2 Foozy bars in there. One worked for me, one didn't. But like when you're doing it twice, it's like, oh, I shouldn't be able to tell that you're doing it twice. Just the understanding of enunciation and word placement for me still isn't there with Quadeca. I feel like sometimes he relies too heavy on a fast flow. I feel like sometimes he is too quick and doesn't enunciate his words correctly. And sometimes words are placed in the wrong spot. Now, when I say that, certain words need to be emphasized different ways than other words. When you say a certain word and people understand it, it's all about the enunciation of it. And sometimes on a certain beat, certain sounds clash with certain words. So it's about saying the words that you want to say, but in the right spots. Sometimes I find myself moving around bars in my song to see where they hit better. And that's something I don't think Quadeca's doing. I don't think it's something Quadeca needs to be doing, but it is something that sometimes I feel like his bars don't always hit. And when I read them, sometimes they hit, but sometimes it doesn't hit in the song. And I think that's ultimately what you need to do if you're going to be a mainstream artist. And he's someone who's garnering like 1 million views, you know, consistently at this point. I mean, he could drop a trailer and get like 500,000 views at this point. He clearly has a full understanding of everything he needs to at this point in time, if not a little bit more than I expected a 19-year-old Quadeca to know. So I would give Ego Death a 6 out of 10. First above positive, exceeding expectations. This is the first time in Quadeca's career to me that I feel like he exceeded my expectations for where I thought he would be. And I think that might be part of the juices of finally like getting some recognition, which is awesome, because when you finally get some recognition is when people start taking you seriously. And when people start taking you seriously, sometimes you need to take yourself seriously. And I think you can see that kind of buckle down in Quadeca and taking himself seriously as an opportunity. So all of this, along with a few more recent singles off of his upcoming album release, Quadeca kind of finds himself in a position to be someone like an independent artist like Code of the Friend, right? Code of the Friend is an independent artist who's found an ability to chart on Apple Music and found his own sound and wave, all while producing it all himself, mixing it all himself, rapping it all himself, pretty much shooting it all himself. Code of the Friend is the label. That's super dope, and you can see the independence in Quadeca, which is why I bring him up. Quadeca will have the ability to, I think Quadeca will chart, but if he will stay on the charts, I don't know. Quadeca's core audience isn't on streaming services, whereas Code of the Friends is. Quadeca clearly took the buzz and flipped it into something a large audience would want to hear when he started making voice memos, and since then, obviously, he's released singles like Alone Together, Beamin', Where'd You Go? Most recently, I think Live Like This. For me, his hit song, like quote unquote, on each project was always better and better over time. He's consistently topping himself, which is what you want to see. And not to mention, he's starting to get a little connected in the industry, you know, like he's starting to work with Genius. He's starting to do some stuff. So all of this summing up to me for what is the next step in the artistic process after creating music that is increasing an interest within the genre, which I would say very easily Quadeca does. So when you're making mainstream sounding music, which I think Quadeca's slowly, if not almost there, I would say that you have to answer the next question, which is why now? Why should people care about Quadeca right now? So the boxes that I would like checked as an artist is, here, I'll put them up on the screen too, I think, but it is audience pull, writing ability, passion and hunger. How much do you want it? Your uniqueness to the culture and to the game. What are you going to do for it to progress it? Basically what I already went over, which is your production, your mix, and your music. How good does it sound? Memorability. Will people remember you over time in the same way that people remember typical mainstream artists? I mean, some fizzle out, but Quadeca's not like blowing up out of nowhere. He's growing a fan base slowly. Personality. How much does your personality fit in the culture in the game, and how much is your personality going to add to the conversation that hip hop is ultimately supposed to answer? And that's obviously more for the culture than it is for the mainstream. But also what is more for the mainstream is your marketability. Do people want to hear what you have to say? Can you make it so people need to hear what you have to say? That's what that all kind of comes down to. So we'll take it one by one. Audience pull. Does Quadeca have the audience to be mainstream? I think he's slowly getting there if he's not already there. Problem, I think, being that it's mostly on YouTube. I wouldn't be shocked if his entire YouTube fan base went and checked out his album and consequently got it charting a little bit on Apple Music and all of a sudden really blasted his monthly listeners up. It's been the longest time since we've heard from Quadeca. He took 2 years to release voice memos and it really worked out. And then it took another, I guess, a year and a half to release From Me to You, and I think that's going to be super dope. But yes, I think he has the audience pull to start doing numbers on streaming services. Does he have the writing ability? I feel like he just meets the mark of having the writing ability. Ultimately, I feel like he, again, relies too heavy on certain flows. I feel like his bars sometimes are a little juvenile, a little trivial. He's just still a 21-year-old kid rapping. It doesn't bleed in too much. Like, he has some maturity in there that it's not the end of the world for me if he's going to be a mainstream artist and doesn't quite hit every single bar all the time, because there's mainstream artists that have terrible bars, you know? Except those mainstream artists are typically making hits. He's making music for the people who are like into rap, you know? Like, again, if he's put in the fast rap category by Genius, you know, you're a fast rapper until you break out of that box, which it feels like he's breaking out of that box, and from me to you, but again, we'll get to that later. His passion and hunger for sure is there. I would say he checks that box. I think you could see that he's trying really hard to be a mainstream rapper and just be an artist in the music industry in a way. I think he's consequently unique to the culture in the game if he breaks into it and checks that box, because someone from the suburbs growing up on rap and the internet hasn't quite been represented in hip-hop. Like I don't think Quadeca's gangbanging. I don't think Quadeca's pulling a gat on somebody sometimes. I don't think he's ever had that happen in his life. Now, stuff like that happens with fame, but he has a unique perspective in saying so and doing what he's doing. His production and his music, his mix, obviously, like I already said, is there. I feel like he finally exceeded expectations with voice memos, and especially with his singles, is getting to the point where it's like it was consistently exceeding my expectations. Like, I'd give some of his singles like 7s and 8s, you know? So I'd say he's there for sure, and working with people who are mainstream in there when it comes to mix and production. His memorability, I would argue, is there. I think the KSI Beef is the most memorable thing he's been a part of, and that's not just because I was introduced to Quadeca then, more so because it's the most viewed thing that he has on his channel. Even his singles aren't doing as much as that. I want something off of this album to do that for him. He needs to have a hit song on this album. That's absolutely necessary for the memorability and to be in a mainstream appeal. You need that one song that can break into the mainstream if that's what he's trying to do right now. Typically, if you do it long enough, you will eventually stumble upon that song, but if he can strategically put it on this project, I think he could be mainstream by the end of this release, basically. Personality, again, I feel like he checks that box, and his marketability obviously is there because he's finding an audience, which it's the same thing as audience pulling away, but you could be marketable without the audience. So the only thing that's kind of on the fence for me as a check is his writing ability and his memorability. I would say his videos are very memorable. He has a unique perspective, but I feel like there's little things that he's just barely checking the boxes of, that if he can fully check those boxes with this project, then that's awesome. And I would have no issues saying he'd be a mainstream artist, but other than those little things, I'd say that's what's keeping me on the fence of being like, yes, he could be a mainstream artist. And those two little things kind of answered the final overarching question of this video, which is, why are you? Ultimately, from what I've heard from Quadeca, and again, I've listened to all of his projects front to back. I haven't listened to the older stuff multiple times, but I've listened to the standout tracks that I like multiple times. While I'm learning about Quadeca, I feel like his writing ability wasn't there in the past to tell me about Quadeca. I feel like he slowly got there in voice memos, but voice memos was kind of more to be like, hey, look, I know how to make music now. What I want to see in From Me to You, what my expectations are for Me to You, is for him to answer who exactly he is, what exactly he's about, and why I should be supporting him. Why are you who you are? I don't feel like I've been answered that question from Quadeca yet. There are some stuff that I find out about him just from his content, right? But most mainstream artists have an ability to be so interpersonal in their music that people will relate to them. And I haven't felt that interpersonal relationship with Quadeca yet. And I feel like that is super necessary if you're gonna be someone who's charting, you know what I'm saying? That's mainstream, right? How mainstream are you? Are you charting on Billboard? That's the mainstream of the mainstream, you know? So to meet expectations for me, there's kind of a baseline of what I want his music to sound like now in my head, which would be meeting expectations. I expect him to exceed expectations in production and mix, because I've heard some stuff from him, but I imagine that this is going to be even better mixed, even better sounding, even better produced. And I would assume it's going to be even a little bit better written than a lot of his older music, because he's been waiting a little while to tell people about it. He wanted to make sure it was done. All that being said, that's just meeting expectations, and in some ways exceeding expectations. Again, for me, exceeding expectations would be blowing me away with like a hit song, or like blowing me away with production or mix, having him kind of come out of his singing pocket a little bit more and actually maintaining comfortability in that, not relying on the flows that I see him rely on when he's trying to fill space, or just got like on a bare bones basic appeal, like impress people with how fast he can rap. I don't care. I want you to make a good song. And again, if he starts doing that, that would start exceeding expectations for me. I think the creative direction's absolutely there. Visual content has been there. I want to hear new music from him. I don't want to hear any singles on it. I expect to hear singles on it, so that would be meeting expectations, but exceeding expectations would be having this entire project be brand new music, never heard. I don't want to hear Where'd You Go. I don't want to hear Like, that would be exceeding expectations. I'm expecting to give this, so if I'm expecting to give this tape a 6, I guess technically I'd be giving it a 5 if it happens, but I'm expecting to give this tape around a 6, maybe a 7, but I expect to see some big growth in Quadeca, and if he answers why are you and kind of proves how memorable he could be, proves his writing ability, proves his passion and hunger for the game, I think he could be a mainstream artist. I don't see why he couldn't be. He needs to kind of do all that for me before I could fully give him the, like, and I'm not passing him the baton because I'm not in the race, but before, like, I feel like the industry will pass him the baton, like, he needs to answer a few more questions, you know? And again, I hope he does. I expect him to, but I guess we will see. Thank you guys very much for watching. This has been far too long. Much love to Quadeca. I do fully expect him to be a mainstream artist at some point in time, and I hope it's soon. But if it's this project or not, I guess we'll see.